Hello and welcome back to The Hatch. I'm Rosie Murphy.
And I'm Sammy Roth, and this is the podcast where we talk about Lost.
This week, Season 6, Episode 5, Lighthouse. This is a Jack flash sideways, and of course Jack and Hurley visit Jacob's lighthouse.
Yeah, continuing the pattern of Season 1 here with the flashback, flash sideways order. We also have the first part this week of a conversation with Michael Emerson. A lot more to come in Dr. Linus, but we'll get started with Michael this week.
Let's get right into it.
We start each week on The Hatch with our hot takes. Rosie, you got a hot take on Lighthouse?
I do, and it might be controversial. And it is that I am intrigued and kind of delighted by feral Claire.
Oh my God, Rosie, I was thinking the same thing.
Yes!
I couldn't believe it. I was so watching the previously thinking, oh God, why do we have to deal with this shit? Right. And then it was kind of fun.
It was good. And Emily DeRavin, plays it really well. I think she really strikes the right balance between, oh, this is the old Claire we know and love, who's been surviving out in the jungle and has kind of, it almost has the vibes that you got from Rousseau in Season 1.
Yeah.
Where it's like, oh, this is just somebody who, by virtue of circumstance, has, had to do some really wild things to survive, and it has made him a little kooky. But yeah, I think it really works. And I know it goes in, some different directions, and we only got the briefest glimpse of weird, creepy baby doll.
The
but I really liked it.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that, because I was kind of feeling weird about how much I was enjoying it watching this, because I have such poor memories of it.
Right.
I think that it's not what I would have done with the character necessarily, but knowing that it's coming, and maybe with the low expectations that we have, I don't know, her reaction when Jin says that Kate took him. What do you mean she took him? Mm-hmm. And then, at the end when Jin has to sort of lie to her because he realizes how insane she's gotten and that he's going to be in trouble if he continues telling her the truth, that stuff had me on edge. It made my skin crawl. Right,
especially when she kills the other, whose name escapes me, but who is being honest. It's this holy shit moment of oh, this is not the old Claire, because Claire, while I think a great character, often came off as somebody who needed help, who wasn't she wasn't driving the action of the story most of the time. And this is a Claire who is in control to almost a terrifying degree, right?
Well, she's not in control of her own mind, but she's definitely in control of the scene and the events happening around her.
Yeah. I thought it was fascinating, and it worked. It worked for me.
I'm with you, and I still suspect that it's not going to hold up over the course of the season, but I agree with you that Emily DeRavin absolutely kills it. Mm-hmm. Really, really brings it, and probably deserves more credit for that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I really liked the notes that they sprinkled throughout of reminding us that this is Jack's sister.
Well, it ties back to the fact that this whole episode is about kind of Jack's family life.
Right.
It all kind of stems back to Christian Shepherd's role in the mythos and the thematicness of the show. Let me quickly share my hot take, which is not nearly so so controversial or hot as yours, but is also related to Jack's family. Continuing on with my trend here of minor complaints about otherwise wonderful episodes, Jack's mom, Margot, and this is no disrespect to the actor who plays Margot, but just probably the least interesting character who recurs throughout the show. They bring her back every once in a while when they need Christian's wife or Jack's mom to be there, and you just never get any sense of her beyond she's a cardboard cutout figure who serves this role. It's a little disappointing. I wish they had done something with her. They just basically do nothing except put her there where they need someone to speak those lines.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't disagree. I've never really thought about that character.
Exactly,
perhaps by design.
There's nothing to think about.
Presumably she was part of his life and part of his formation and things, but,
Yeah.
Oh, well.
That's kind of my feeling about it. They could have made a little bit of effort with Jack's mom, and they did not. But
that's fair.
Otherwise, wonderful fascinating episode. But we also have a hot take related to Jack's family that we should probably share from a listener.
Hi, this is Alex from Ohio, and I wanted to give my hot take about season 6, episode 5, The Lighthouse. In this episode, we meet David. I always thought David was a little weird considering he was a child that never existed, and somehow he's in this sideways purgatory world. But one thing I did think was interesting about him was the way that music plays into his character and story. We see David playing the piano. We know that Jack played the piano at one time. And then also Daniel Faraday and his kind of plight with music. So I was wondering if this was something where music kind of represented the faith side of the man in science versus man of faith thing, and it's kind of helping Jack to embrace that faith and letting go type of theme. So just curious what your thoughts were about that. Thanks for the show. Really enjoying it. Bye.
You know, I gotta say, I had totally forgotten that we'd seen Jack play the piano a number of times.
Me too.
I had to look this up on Lostpedia. We saw him and Sarah playing the night before their wedding in Do No Harm, and then also Jack alone in the barracks in his bungalow in The Man from Tallahassee. At least two instances of that had just totally slipped my mind.
Yeah. Well, and I think this is a really interesting idea that Alex brings up here. The idea that music is something that can be sort of mystical and maybe help people embrace the letting go side of ourselves. But I think it can also be something that is so regimented and requires so much practice, and it can be this strong emphasis on perfection. And near the end of Lighthouse, there is a conversation between Jack and his son where the son says, you know, when I was young, you were so into this and like intense about it, and I didn't want to disappoint you. Because I'm not going to be able to do this perfectly. And, you know, Jack, in a really kind of profound way of you know, transcending his own father and his own patterns, is able to say, like, of course I don't care about that. I love you and I'm proud of you and you don't have to be perfect. But I think it can function both ways in an interesting way.
But both ways? What do you mean?
I think the music can bring in some of that mysticism and some of that artistry while still having the other side of that coin can be perfectionism and rigidity.
Right. Well, that kind of goes to the Faraday point, doesn't it? Because it always felt like with Faraday that the music was kind of also utilizing that sort of science-y side of his brain, just expressed or manifested in a different way.
Yeah. Like
he had both of those things within him at once.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is really interesting. I mean, it also just occurred to me as you were saying that you know, the music, the idea of music being key, as Alex expressed it, to letting go. I mean, it just makes me think of Michael Giacchino's score for Lost and how you know, his tracks, like the letting go track from the finale, are just like so intimately associated with the feelings that Lost evokes in you. So I feel like there's something there.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. Thank you, Alex. If you want to share a hot take with us, give us a call. The number is 9546-DHARMA, +1 at the beginning if you're outside the United States. And 60 seconds or less, and let us know what you think of the episode we're watching. There's so much rich stuff with Jack this episode. I hardly even know where to... I mean, I want to talk about his relationship with David, obviously, but there's just a lot of build-up in that story.
Yeah. What did you make of Jack's relationship with his son and kind of where that story ends?
Well, I mean, I think the place to start with that is the fact of David's existence. Like, right. I mean, Alex mentions this, that it is kind of weird that he has a son who doesn't actually exist, that there's this character who's not real. Mm-hmm. I guess I found myself wondering as this got started, like, why it was that Jack's subconscious envisioned this, you know, created this sort of afterlife experience for him where he had this kid. And it's like, you know, I think the obvious starting point is he never got to have a kid in real life, and there's something, you know, something a little bit sad about that, because I think Jack probably would have wanted to be a father and raise a child, but then it gets into like, okay, why does he imagine up this reality where he has such a strained relationship with his son, and is he, you know, does it stem from a place of fear, that he fears that he would have been the kind of father that his dad was, that he wouldn't have been able to do anything besides that? Does it come from wanting to be able to sort of take this redemption course where he's able to show that, you know, show the world, or maybe even show himself as he does in that last scene, that he doesn't have to be the kind of father his dad was. It definitely seems like it's something having to do with him not wanting to be his dad, but it's interesting that this is kind of the setup that he gives himself, I think.
I mean, I think it's exactly what you described. I think it's about, Jack's sort of core wound or belief that he inherited from his father is that you don't have what it takes. And his father was somebody who belittled him and put challenges in front of him that he had to overcome. And, arguably made him into the professional who he became, but also like kind of fucked him up a little bit. And I think part of Jack's story is not only working out those things in and for himself. And, that's some of what we see happening on the island in this episode, where he's trying to figure out what the hell he's doing here and what it all means. But I think with David, it's about forgiving his dad for some things, like the idea that no child's relationship with their parent is ever going to be perfect and no parent is ever going to be perfect. But we can avoid repeating those patterns that are really harmful. I think what Jack is doing in the Sideways is coming to terms with the fact that he and his dad did not have a good relationship, and his dad hurt him in a lot of ways, and then not passing those patterns on.
Yeah, I agree with all of that, and I especially like what you said about forgiveness, because you're right, he's coming to terms with the fact not only that that his father hurt him, but also coming to terms with the fact that, in some ways he is like his father, and he has to forgive himself for that. Like, he's transcending that here.
Parent either.
Right. I mean, it's what, it's what Margot says to him about, how do you know David's not afraid of you, like you were afraid of your dad, and realizing that he's got some of that within him, and he can transcend that, but he's also got to forgive himself for that, and maybe that's why he sets it up the way he does, because he can't learn to forgive himself if he doesn't put himself in that position where he sees that he's also manifesting those traits that he so despised in his father.
Yeah, manifesting them, but is able to interrupt them and chart a new course for him and his son while his son is still pretty young.
Yeah. It's a shame that Jack didn't really get to raise a son or a daughter or a child and do this in real life. I mean, I'm glad he gets to sort of create this for himself in this, liminal space or whatnot, but, it would have been nice if, he and Kate, or, like Hurley says this week, I would have thought you guys would have had 12 kids, and Jack says, I'm not cut out for it. I mean, he is afraid he's going to be his father is probably one of the reasons it doesn't happen, but it would have been nice for him.
Yeah, I mean, I think you nailed it. He's afraid that he's going to be his father, and that is something that he didn't get to, that's a cycle he didn't get to complete during his life. And I think we see that in a lot of the characters here. There are sort of things they don't get to work out, and things they don't get to fix, and problems they don't get to fully address. They don't die fully self-realized, right? Like the point of the Sideways is to work all of that stuff out before they can move on.
I mean, this is making me think all sorts about the conversation we've got with Michael Emerson this week, which we will make people wait a few more minutes for. But yeah, potentially as long as necessary. I think you're totally right. I mean, I've talked about this before, but I just got to say, like, in general, I love how Christian Shepherd just continues to serve as, like, such a key touch point for the themes of the entire show. Like, the guy died before the show even started.
Yeah.
And, we got White Rabbit, right at the front, episode 5, where Jack is literally chasing the ghost of his dead father around. And now it's like, 5 years later, I think literally and figuratively, he's still chasing the ghost of his dead father around. I mean, literally to the sense that, as Claire references this week, Man in Black was still out there, like impersonating the guy. But, we're reminded, we see the coffin that Jack smashed. We get sort of a callback to that with Jack then smashing the mirror up to show that Jack still hasn't, totally let go of that part of himself. We get, we get all sorts of White Rabbit imagery that, chasing of the White Rabbit. That's where Juliet's spare key is in the Flash Sideways. And David is reading, annotated Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. And, it's like they're literally looking for Christian's will and trying to figure out where he put his last will and testament. Like, I just like how they kind of literally and figuratively sprinkle the Christian shepherd, story throughout. It's really well done. What else was on your mind watching this one?
Well, so let's sort of do a little compare and contrasting to what happens to Jack on the island, which is that, Hurley has this conversation with dead Jacob and tells Jack, Jacob told me to tell you that you have what it takes. Mm-hmm. Very obviously setting that up as a foil to Christian. And then he and Hurley go on this bit of a quest to find the lighthouse. And, along the way, they run into the caves and they see the old Adam and Eve skeletons. And I want to take a brief detour here to say, I do sort of wish that Adam and Eve had been them. And I know that was widely theorized at the time. I think that would have been dope.
It would have been more satisfying, even though it would have been obvious at this point. It would have been great. I love that Hurley says it. I wish they'd followed through on it.
Yeah, but whatever. Gripes aside.
I'm with you. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, Jack is like really doing some pushing and pulling here. Like on one hand, for maybe the first time ever, like they run into Kate and Jack just like lets her go do her thing rather than really trying to convince her to come do his thing. And she says, I hope you find what you're looking for. And Jack lets her go to search for Claire. And he says, one of the lines that he says that I think is super interesting is,
I came back here because I was broken. And I was stupid enough to think this place could fix me.
Which is, the framing, I was broken. It's not that I had to fix anything else. It's not that I had to save everybody else. I was broken and I needed to save myself. And of course, the second half of that is him saying, I don't think that's going to work. Like, I don't think this place has the magic or the power or whatever that I thought it had. And then we see again this push-pull where he thinks Jacob's going to have the answers because he sees his name on the wheel and he sees the house there and feels like he's gotten close. And I think what makes him so angry is the realization that he's been like foiled again. Like Jacob's not coming there. He's not going to get to talk to him. He's not going to get these answers yet again. And I think that's what sets him off. What do you think?
I think that's spot on. I hadn't thought about it that way, but totally. Like even as he's acknowledging, I mean, this is Jack. So even when it comes to himself, that he's finally realized, like, I can't just fix everyone else. I need to fix myself. His instinct so badly is just find the answer, fix. You're right. That when, even after he's acknowledged that it's not going to happen, then it's like, oh shit, maybe it's going to happen. And then it pisses him off so bad that it does. I think you're totally right. Right.
I see a lot of myself in this week's Jack, as I occasionally do.
And I love what Jacob's commentary is to Hurley about that. The whole line about
Jack is here because he has to do something. He can't be told what that is. He's got to find it himself. Sometimes you can just hop in the back of someone's cab and tell them what they're supposed to do. Other times, you have to let them look out at the ocean for a while.
Looking out to the ocean for a while, that's not Jack's instinct because it feels passive and it feels slow and like he's not taking action. But ultimately, and this is something, you brought this in here, so I'm just doing it, something that, again, I have to remind myself all the time, that you don't have to be doing shit in every moment. Like, sometimes if you want to get where you're going in life, you got to stop and slow down and clear your mind and just stare out at the ocean. Staring out at the ocean would not be my thing necessarily. I'll stare at a mountain, but, that's just how it works.
Well, yeah, and just sort of trust that there are things happening that you don't know about and maybe you don't get to know about, right? I think one thing that makes Jack so angry here is that he doesn't get to see Jacob and Hurley can. And I think that kind of pisses Jack off.
Interesting.
Like the answers are so close and yet out of reach. Like, of course that's so frustrating, but the lesson Jack is being taught here is you need to go sit and stare by the ocean and let things unfold and sort of let go, one might say. And sort of, either Jack can continue here to trust that I did come back here for a reason and I don't know what that is yet, but it's there. Or he can, I think his temptation this episode is to give up on that and say, oh, fuck it. I believed in something that wasn't real, and that's not, that was a different sort of white rabbit I was chasing. And it's not, of course. He does ultimately get, I think, that resolution, but
he gets it
yet.
from within, not from finding something that he's chasing.
Yes.
I mean, that's the thing about the White Rabbit. I mean, this is, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. Like, yeah, in a fantasy book, in a story, you can follow the White Rabbit down the rabbit hole and go to Wonderland and find out that the rabbit, resides in a fancy little house and whatnot and is going to, serve the queen. But that's not in reality. In reality, the rabbit disappears down the hole and that's it. That's the end of the, you got to go figure it out by yourself after that.
I thought you were going to say the White Rabbit was inside us all along.
I should have said that. It's true. No, I mean, I don't know. There's so many directions to go with this. Like, part of me was just thinking now, like, maybe this is a metaphor for us as Lost fans as well. Like, sometimes when you get the answers you've been seeking, it's less satisfying than, trying to think through yourself what the answers might be and reflect upon why you care so much to find that answer and to... Anyway, White Rabbit is a great metaphor for all of this, and Christian Shepherd, and I love what they do with it. Well, we should talk about Hurley.
We should talk about Hurley. It's a great Hurley episode.
Basically, every line of dialogue that Hurley says this episode is amazing. I just kept, copy-pasting from the Lostpedia transcript and just writing LOL, LOL, LOL. Yeah. Do you have any favorites?
What's the reference he makes to Obi-Wan Kenobi?
Jacob just shows up whenever he wants. He's like Obi-Wan.
Very funny. Hurley is such an interesting foil for Jack, and I really like it when they put these two characters together because he is the epitome of, I don't really understand what is happening, but I'm going to do what I'm asked. I'm going to go with the flow. You can just get into the back of my cab and tell me what to do, and I won't... I'm not here to ask why. I don't necessarily care why. Hurley has a kind of faith here that stands in very strong contrast to Jack. Just a sense of okay, Jacob is really appearing to me. He doesn't go to the place of, am I crazy? Am I inventing this? He believes that Jacob is really there. And he is. I mean, right? As far as...
Yeah.
We
he
can
totally is.
Tell.
He knew what Jack's dad said to him. Hurley didn't know that.
Yeah. Yeah, and he told Hurley to say to Dogen that he's a candidate. Jacob is not a figment of Hurley's imagination, and Hurley trusts that. And is able to, just as he's able to find the cabin a couple seasons ago, he is able to serve as this kind of, conduit in an interesting way. I think because he sort of trusts Jacob and trusts the process.
Yeah, and it's so interesting in that context that Hurley is the one who ends up with sort of the great purpose of running the island, because unlike Jack or a lot of the other characters, I think, like you said, he's kind of just going with the flow. He's not out there actively seeking, I must know what my purpose is, what is my role, what am I trying to grasp onto. Hurley's default position is letting go.
Yeah.
And sometimes that can serve him poorly, when he's, spending his life, as working at Mr. Cluck's Chicken and sitting on the couch, not doing anything, and his mom or his grandmother, I forget.
His mom's trying to get him to date. And,
yelling. And it's like that, but then when things are going well for Hurley, it can be a great quality.
Yeah. He
makes some good choices and then just lets himself roll with it. So it's interesting. He's not seeking that, grasping on for something at the end, but that's kind of where he ends up, and maybe... I don't know, maybe he's well suited for it for that reason. Maybe we, the best leaders and the best, the people you want in charge of stuff maybe aren't the ones who are out there seeking the power or seeking the ambition. Maybe we're better off with someone like this.
Well, his number 2 is Ben Linus.
True.
Who is the epitome of seeking power and ambition, although...
No, that is interesting about Ben. Maybe you need that guy beside you or that person beside you to do that role, but... I kind of like the idea that Hurley's in charge, not because he badly wanted that, but because he's, sort of just willing to see what happens.
Yeah.
He had so many good lines of dialogue. I love his scene with Dogen so much, where he's just trying so hard to like sound confident as he repeats the things
like,
that goes
I love temples and like Indiana Jones stuff.
and then at the end, after Dojin goes away, he says to Jacob,
"Okay, it's bad enough. You already made me write down way too much stuff, and I just lied to a samurai. Look, if you have any idea on how to get Chad to go on your little adventure, I'm listening, dude."
Yeah, the Dojin thing also, he also says to Jacob at the end, "Thanks for the 7 years of bad luck," about the mirror when Jack smashes it. But I did want to bring up the Dojin scene before forgetting with Jack. I feel like this is actually one of those times when, like, knowing what's going on with the sort of whole business of this season improves the quality of a scene. You know, some of the stuff falls flat because, you know, it's the afterlife, but this is one where it's like, we haven't even gotten the scene where Dojin explains what happens to his son yet, right? Like, that's, I had to double check so I can remember, that's next episode. So, like, to know how meaningful it is, you know, that he's getting some time with his son here that he didn't have, and to know that this is, you know, Dojin's own version of the afterlife where he's created this reality where he can, you know, be with his son again and be proud and not have, you know, gotten the kid tragically killed. It actually made that scene very meaningful, I thought, in a way that you wouldn't have gotten at all not knowing what was coming.
Yeah, I agree.
So, a good moment for Dojin, who, you know, issues with the character, but a good moment for Dojin.
He gets a few.
Yeah.
Real quick, before we go to the interview, we got another hot take, just kind of about the structure and the format of the show that I just want to toss in here.
Hey, got a hot take that's not really specific to any episode, but I think it needs to be brought up before the end of the series. The thing everyone misses out on with the binging format for Lost is the recap episodes. Sitting down for the finale to watch a 2-hour recap on top of a 2-hour finale truly felt like an event that most TV shows never get the chance to do, especially nowadays with the binging format. And I think it's a disservice not to ever mention and credit the team for the beautiful, wonderful recap episodes that they did every half season finale and every season finale and before every season opener for 6 years straight. And they were always on point.
As I've said on the podcast many times, I didn't watch Lost in its live airing. Do you remember these recap episodes?
You know, I remember that they existed. I gotta say, I don't think I ever really watched them because I was already, you know, and you know, I'm sure that the people who made them did a great job, and all respect, as our caller is saying. I didn't really need them. I will say that, as I probably said here before, like, you know how I feel about binging. Like, I do think there's a lot of value in doing it one at a time, but I hate to say I didn't watch the recaps.
Yeah.
Yeah. One more thing before the Emerson. I know we talked about how we both felt a little more positive about the Claire story. What are your thoughts on Squirrel Baby at this point?
It's much funnier now that after that interview we did
With Rob Kiker,
the prop master, about how it was created and Damon and the creator's insistence that it be continually creepier. That's very funny to think about. I mean, yeah, Squirrel Baby is obviously is what it is. But it's, you know, they don't overemphasize it. It only shows up in that those couple of shots where Jin is sort of in the tent or the hut that Claire is living in, and he looks at it and kind of realizes what it is. And then we move on. You know, it's not like we dwell on it, which makes it fine to me.
I gotta tell you, I had the same reaction.
Yeah.
I was not offended by it.
Yeah, it's weird, but it holds I remember it being a bigger part of the story than it is. Maybe it is in coming episodes, but
I kind of think it's not emphasized that much after this.
It just really has a hold on us.
Yeah, I mean, it makes an impression, but then they move on. Yeah, I'm with you. It's not so bad. Anyway, so we've got Michael Emerson coming up here. We'll have more from him. The start of this conversation, all about Dr. Linus, in a couple of weeks, but. Here's some of the later stuff we got into dealing with events throughout the course of season 6.
One of the things that's really interesting about this episode as it fits into sort of Ben's character arc is at the end of the series, there really is not any there's not much redemption for Ben, at least that we get to see. He's, you know, in the series finale, everyone has a moment where they go inside this church and they all decide to sort of move on from these lives that they've lived. And Ben says, you know, I'm not fit to do that yet.
Yeah.
And it leaves the viewer, or it did me at least, with the feeling of, you know, he hasn't been able to sort of answer for these things yet, or hasn't been able to sort of reach clarity. But in this other world, there is a Ben who seems that he has been able to do that. I don't know. It's just a very interesting contrast.
I thought it was just really poignant that, and he's not arguing anything but the fact that he is unready. He has not, whatever that place is, whatever that chapel is at the end, it's some kind of portal to the afterlife. And like in the fifth act of a Shakespeare comedy, you know, everybody walks off happily into the afterlife, 2 by 2, but there is no second for Ben. He hasn't a love, a redeemer. He hasn't the partner and it appears like you can't enter the happy hunting ground without a give and take, some kind of love, understanding between two, you know, a leaving behind of selfishness, which, and he had a lot of selfishness to atone for. So it's going to take him a little longer. I don't know who he might eventually be able to reach paradise with, or whatever you want to call it, but
yeah,
he's not ready. And he seemed to me, what I liked in playing it was that he's perfectly at peace with that.
Mm-hmm.
You all go ahead.
Yeah.
Good on you. Hurley, you were the best. John, what a time we had. Off you go.
I mean, I would like to think there's a way for him to get in there without, you know, that sort of partner character. There are a few people in the church. John Locke is in the church alone at the end. So is Boone, played by Ian Somerhalder. They don't have sort of the true love figure with them. So I would like to think that there's something that Ben can ultimately do to get there. I just don't know. I don't know exactly what it is, because you're right. He had much more to sort of atone for than everyone else. But I don't know. You know, is it atonement or redemption or personal growth, or it's unclear to me what he needs to find, but I certainly hope he's able to find it.
Yeah. And maybe he finds it in existence. Maybe it doesn't have to be, you know, walking through the gate to heaven hand in hand with someone else, but he has to find out what it's worth, what it takes. How are people good and loving?
Yeah. You talk about finding meaning in existence, or finding, you know, however you just said this was more articulate, but it made me think that in the Dr. Linus, when you're sort of begging for your life and trying to escape the bond that Alana has put you in, and you're trying to make that bargain with Miles, I found myself wondering, what does Ben even want to live for at this point? You know, what purpose or goal does he see for himself that he's trying so hard to stay alive? And to an extent, I wonder as well if that's still what he's looking for in the afterlife. What is his true meaning or true purpose? If it's not, you know, the attainment of power, perhaps he's still wondering about that.
Yeah, I think it's just backsliding. I think it's just it shows he's unhip to what it takes. That he keeps trying to bargain his way into some kind of salvation or friendship or something like that, and he has all the wrong ideas, all the wrong. But he finally kind of makes a confession. I mean, if you want to get sacramental about it, that scene in the jungle is confessional, and in a way, she offers him a kind of low level of absolution or forgiveness.
Yeah. But it's still not enough.
No. But he's always been bouncing back and forth a little bit. That's why he's sitting on the bench outside the chapel.
Right.
Yeah.
At the end.
Yeah.
Because he's still, God, sometimes he gets really a bad idea. That old lust for power comes back into him and he thinks, gee, maybe I could work this time.
Well, it happens at the end. I'm sorry, Rosie, you go ahead.
I think we might be about to bring up the same thing, which is a couple episodes before the end of the series, Ben kills Charles Widmore. In the sort of context is that Locke, the evil Locke, is threatening to kill Penny unless Widmore tells him what he wants to know. And
Penny, Widmore's daughter.
Yeah, and Widmore's sort of whispering in Locke's ear, and then Ben pulls out his gun and just shoots him in the chest and says he doesn't get to save his daughter. And it seems like you're also sort of threatening, like, if Locke kills Penny, so be it. And it's, of course, Ben is holding over like anger at how Alex died, but this has been going round and round for quite a while at this
right
point.
And it seems you've had all this personal growth, and then there you are, sentencing Widmore and his daughter to death, seemingly to settle your old score.
Yeah it's pretty bad.
Yeah,
It's another example of he doesn't get it.
Yeah.
He can't step outside the moment. Maybe that's what everybody's being asked to do to redeem themselves, is to step outside the moment, to set aside anger and history and retribution, to have a cooler head and a longer vision. I don't know. That's good though. I had forgotten that he kills Widmore.
Yeah, it happens right in the second to last episode, and it kind of comes out of nowhere, but it's quite jarring to watch. I mean, it's cold-blooded. It's totally unprovoked, and he's defenseless.
And what does John Locke say?
He says, "Ben, you never cease to amaze me." It's great. It's great dialogue.
Great. Yeah. That's exactly the right thing to say.
Yeah, we had, by the way, we just spoke with Terry as well, and he had wonderful things to say about working with you guys. It just must have been a fun to the very end.
It was. He's a keeper. You work with a lot of people, but not so many of them remain a friend for life, and he is that for me. We were of similar ages and similar backgrounds, Midwestern kids who went to college and did not find success easily or quickly. And both of us have a similar way of working. We're not really methody actors. We kind of clock in and clock out, take care of the business and try to have some fun while we do it, and not get too heavy about it, because believe me, the material was heavy enough, but the heaviness takes care of itself. I think you don't have to buy into it to play it.
Yeah.
So anyway, we had we had a shared philosophy of how to navigate being a TV actor.
Want to talk about the finale just a little bit. We talked about the church scene, but on the island, some intense stuff happens as well. You remember the whole sequence where everything is shaking and it's raining and you get trapped under a tree, giant tree falls on you?
Oh yeah.
It's going to fall on Hurley, on Jorge Garcia, and you rush forward and actually heroically, it's a good turn for you, push him out of the way, and then you get pinned down under the tree. It looked like it must have been crazy to film, but it turned out well.
It was one of those scenes with the artificial rain. And artificial rain for the camera is about 5 or 10 times more drenching than any real rain you've ever been in. Because the camera doesn't pick up falling water very well on just buckets. So they have these towers, water towers, they call them. It's just a pipe that goes up about 20 feet and has like a super, like a nuclear grade sprinkler on it, and water would come down. I mean, you would be drenched in the time you could count to 10. So there was a lot of that stuff, and I can't remember how we did. I guess we dug a little pit so that it looked like the weight of the tree was on me, but I was actually kind of underneath it. And then, you know, the usual foaming at the mouth and gnashing of teeth and, you know, playing the stuff.
Yeah, no, it's fun to watch. It looks, they do a good job at making it look real.
I forgot about that. That whole cataclysmic thing.
Yeah, it's after Desmond kind of unplugs that hole at the heart of the island, and everything goes to hell after that. Earthquakes and cliffs collapsing and trees falling. That's
right.
It's end times kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in pretty short succession after that, pretty much everyone else is leaving, and Ben sort of shrugs and says, well, if the island's going down, I'm going down with it. And it appears he sort of chooses to stay. You know, do you think he's like attached to the island or the idea of it, or just the only place he's ever had a home? Or do you think there's a world in which he would have left?
It's an irony, isn't it? That
yeah.
He wanted to use the island to gain what? Power or whatever. And in the end, I don't know, I guess he's spent so much time there. His investment is so great, and there's nothing else. What's his plan B? I don't know. I don't know. That's one I don't have an answer for. I mean, I played those scenes, but sometimes in the course of shooting Lost, you would play scenes that you didn't fully understand, or you'd say, well, why is he saying this and not saying some other thing? And sometimes I would chalk it up to, this plays great in the moment. You know, this is a good setup for whoever's line is next, or it brings some dynamic to, it completes the circle of something, or it becomes an irony.
Yeah.
Those kinds of things. And I'm not sure they all have to add up. Well, everybody knows that everything didn't add up altogether on Lost, but it's just as well that it didn't. You know, if it adds up, then we don't have that much to talk about.
Right. Well, and from a story perspective, it does set up the end where Hurley ends up becoming the keeper of the island, and Ben agrees to be his deputy. And it's really nice, actually. Hurley says, you know, he asks him to be his number 2, and Ben says, Sammy wrote this line down for us, says, you were a real good number 2. And Ben says, and you were a great number 1, Hugo.
Right.
And it really is poignant. It does seem like Ben is learning again, or learning at long last.
Learning to play well with others, or to let somebody else be the boss.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's maturing. It's taking him thousands of years, but he's maturing.
At the very, very end, when there's 10 minutes left in the series.
Near the end of time.
Well, no, it's not just, I mean, I should say, I know we talk about, you know, it's 3 steps forward, 2 steps back for Ben, but after he kills Widmore in the second to last episode, kind of in the same breath, he sets up John Locke for betrayal. He takes the walkie-talkie and is later using that as, you know, the man in black thinks that Ben is finally in his thrall, and really he's communicating with Miles on the other end of the walkie-talkie, telling them what the guy is up to and feeding them information. So I feel like there's some growth before the thousands of years pass by and whatever comes next.
Yeah.
I always love talking to Michael. Obviously, he has so many interesting insights about the character. But one that really stayed with me is this notion of Ben trying to bargain his way into success. And it's almost like he's trying to take the easy way out rather than suffer through it in order to do the necessary growing. I think what we were talking about with Jack is like a lot of what's happening for Jack on the island in this episode is like he needs to go through the dark night of the soul or whatever in order to have the revelation at the end. And I think that is something we never see Ben do because he is always bargaining and finessing and trying to position himself for his own security and his own safety. Like we never really see him kind of throw up his hands like we do see Jack in this episode and say like, I don't have anything else to offer here. I need to like sit and look out at the ocean, I guess. I think he gets close. I think we see him get close a couple of times, but the idea that like that is the thing that Ben hasn't done and that's why he can't move on, I think is interesting.
I think so too. And the other phrase he used that this reminds me of is he had the comment about, needing to step outside of the moment. Mm-hmm. And, sort of whatever the anger, you're feeling in that moment or the retribution, like, yeah, Ben is basically never able to do that outside of till the afterlife. And I do think we see that with Jack here as well, where first, the scene where he smashes the mirrors.
Yeah.
That's him being unable to step outside of the moment. And he makes the Jack face, the classic Jack face to Hurley when he's shouting, and it's kind of horrifying. But then after he gets that out of his system, it sort of clears his mind to a point where I think he then is able to, he literally steps outside of the lighthouse and he steps outside of his own head and is able to stop. And as Emerson says, have a cooler head and a longer vision was the way he put it. And Jack is trying so hard to get to that point of not making the Jack face and, being able to cool down and think about the longer vision. And yeah, Emerson doesn't quite get there in life, but we're starting to see Jack getting there, I think.
Yeah.
Now that I've just complained briefly about Matthew Fox and the Jack face, I will say I loved the moment where I thought his strongest moment this week as an actor was when he was listening to the message that he had left David in the flash sideways of the message where he says, he doesn't even tell him that his grandpa died. He can't bring himself to do it. And he says, hey, I'm in Sydney and I just needed to hear your voice. I thought that Matthew Fox was very beautiful in that moment. And anyway.
There were some really moving scenes in this episode. I welled up a bit when he's telling David that, he's proud of him, and it's moving. It's very moving. Yeah, but
it is. The kid who played David was pretty good too, I thought. He brought it to that scene with Jack, and he looked like he was on the verge of tears there.
Yeah.
For a kid who doesn't really exist. The actor was, drumroll please, Dylan Minnette, of course. Anyway, we'll be back next week. I'll be watching Sundown, the infamous Saeed Temple episode, so we'll see how that goes.
We will have an interview with Bobby Roth, a previous guest on The Hatch, who directed that episode, and we'll really get into some of the nitty-gritty details about how it came to be what it is.
It's a really interesting conversation, and Bobby's an honest dude, and he'll talk about what he thought worked and what he thought didn't. It's a good conversation.
Sammy mentioned this earlier, but if you would like to call and leave us a hot take about Sundown or anything else in Season 6 or the arc of the show, you can do so at 9546-DHARMA. We are also on Twitter at The Hatch Podcast and at facebook.com/The Hatch Podcast.
Drop us a rating and review if you don't mind. Give us a couple of stars. Tell us what you think of the show. We'd love to hear from you.
Our theme music is by Andy G. Cohen, and our cover art is by Danny Roth.
And we'll see you next week.
Namaste.